Episode 3 of the Greater Call podcast. Welcome. So glad to have you. I am Mark. That is Pastor Kyle Jackson. Kyle, 3.
Mark.
Can you believe it? We passed 2. We're on to 3.
We're off and running, man. So much fun on the first couple episodes. Loved getting the feedback from people in our city and some other people that have been able to listen, and thankful for people that are sharing it with their friends and family members to hopefully encourage them in what we're trying to do here.
Just a reminder, we have got lots of responses from folks, positive, thankfully. Please leave us a nice review if you're so led. Do share this with your friends. Follow us on social. The handles on Instagram and on X are at The Greater Call, or subscribe on YouTube. Okay, Unshakable Mission, the Apostle Paul. Kyle, why don't you walk us through what is, this is some sort of, this could be a movie, this life of Paul.
No doubt. We talked about it earlier. We joked earlier, said this could probably be 2 or 3 episodes just to break down how much my man here meant to our faith and really the stuff that you can learn from him. Even if you're not a follower of Jesus, there's so much to learn from Paul's life. And really the quick background is that he was born a Pharisee, and he was born a Roman citizen. And for most of his life, the first part of his life, we find him persecuting Christians. Like, he was so against.
Zealous, huh?
Yeah,
I mean, he was all in.
No, like all in, 100%. Like he was. If he was for something, Paul was 100% in, which we'll see on the other side of the story, that he was 100% in the other way. When he had this encounter with Jesus, he was persecuting the church, but then he had this encounter, and he was blinded for 3 days, and they led him to a place where he ended up realizing that God was very much real, and God was actually very much for him. And then the beautiful part of the story that I hope encourages people today as we break it down, we'll pull out some leadership stuff from him. We'll talk about his character a lot. But I think my favorite part of the story of Paul is just that in one season of his life, he was persecuting and killing Christians. And then he has this encounter with God, and God just puts him back at a blank slate. Like, he starts at zero
Brand
again,
new, like
holds
fresh.
nothing against him, and then ends up using him maybe greater than anybody else we find in the Bible. He ends up writing 2/3 of the New Testament. For those of you that read the Bible, or those of you that even don't, you're probably familiar with Bible verses all from the New Testament. And Paul wrote 2/3 of the New Testament, planted churches. God used him like crazy, and it's unbelievable from where he started to where he ended up, what God did through his life.
You know, you nailed it. For me, this show is about life. It's about leaving a legacy. It's about leadership. And if you go to one of those leadership conventions, you know, all the topics you hear, all the subjects are basically Paul embodied. We call this one Unshakable Mission. It could have been relentless. It could have been determined. It could have been complete devotion.
Focus.
Yeah, because nothing stopped this guy. I mean, and I want to talk about the transformation.
Yeah.
Because that was a big deal. But I want to talk about, we use the word all in. Shipwrecks, storms, bitten by snakes, persecution, most of his life in jail. The guy through it all he was just all in, and all the while, it's like he had this joy about him that he was like, I don't care where I am, snake on my hand, whatever, throw this thing off, here we go. I'm all for you, God, and I'm going to complete the mission you have put before me.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful picture to those that are listening of when you have vision and purpose in your life, you'll go 100%. I mean, if you don't have vision and you don't have purpose, it's hard to go all in with something. But Paul had clear vision in the early part of his life. Like, he knew what he was against as much as what he was for. And then he had this encounter with God, and he went 100% in on the other side and gave his life to it, planted churches, wrote the New Testament.
From jail off of it.
From jail, like in like horrible situations in jail. I got to visit Rome, in the prison they say that he was in Rome just this past year.
It was hardly comfortable, right?
Standing in it, I don't even think we have the perspective of what the winters and the summers and the years chained in a cell in Rome was really like. And he's writing about joy. And I just think it starts with having clear vision and purpose for your life. Like, he took something, an encounter he had, and he said, you know what, I'm going to go all in with this new vision and purpose. The Bible is clear. It says, I think it's the greatest leadership book ever written, Mark. It says, without a vision, people perish.
Yeah.
And Paul had a vision, and he had a purpose, and he was able to go all in because of that.
Habakkuk, my mom reminds me of writing your vision on the tablets all the time. Let's talk about the transformation, because Paul was Saul of Tarsus.
Yeah.
He was a Pharisee, called himself a Jew of all Jews. He studied with the best Jewish leaders. He persecuted folks, or people of the way, as they were called.
Yeah.
Had Stephen the apostle stoned. Now he's on his way and he's walking over to Damascus. Lots of stuff happens in Damascus. And he has this encounter. Sees the bright light, is blinded.
Yep.
And he has this sort of biblical transformation. Now, I try and put myself in this place where I'm like, okay, maybe the bright light experience, but here in the 21st century, those moments, they may not be as radical
Sure.
as what Paul experienced. But I think if everyone takes just a minute and looks, they might see this kind of watershed moment in their life where it's like, I was going on this road. It's time for me to turn and discover my purpose.
Yeah.
And then commit to it. I want you to just be a pastor and elaborate a bit there, please.
Well, I think that's such a great question and a great thought. I think it's life's greatest question.
Who am I?
Yeah, who am I? Why am I here?
Mm-hmm.
I think we all, whether we believe in God or not, have something inside of us that kind of yearns for that idea of like, what am I living the day-to-day for? I think the world teaches us to live day-to-day because we got to pay bills. Let's get married. Let's have kids. Let's have a picket fence. Let's have a dog. You love your dog. I mean, you're living the ultimate dream. You've got a dog and a beautiful home and a wife that's way prettier than you are and great kids and you have a great job. I mean, that's life, right? That's then you've hit the pinnacle. But there's still something inside of you that yearns for like there's more. And I think that's how God created us. I think if you're listening to the podcast today and you've always wondered, why am I here? I think the Bible's very clear that he didn't create you and then hope you find something to do. He found something for you to do, and then he created you.
Yeah.
I've always given the example, Mark, that everybody has a thumbprint, and nobody's ever had one like you. Nobody has one like you right now, and nobody will ever have one like you in the future. And to think that you weren't designed and created on purpose for a purpose.
I was waiting for you to say that. I've heard you say that often.
In light of the details of our life, that there's nobody like you. Nobody's ever had your personality type. Nobody's ever had your spiritual gifts. Nobody's ever had your upbringing, your life experiences. And when you can take all of that and you can put that into your purpose, your design reveals your destiny.
Yeah.
And you're designed in a very unique way. And I think most people spend their life trying to figure out what that is. And I think we struggle with figuring out what that is. I think it's clearer than we could even imagine. I think Paul's story will even pull some more thoughts out about that for people in a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you for helping me not put the cart in front of the horse. But here's the thing about Paul, and maybe this is the challenge. It's a challenge for me, where when he had this moment. Now, look, if you're hearing like from God Almighty, I'm sure it's like, okay, yeah, I'm paying attention. But all of us have these watershed moments, and hopefully you're lucky enough that you hear directly from God, like that undeniable voice. But we have a moment, and then we're like, okay, maybe it's time. But Paul, when he made the change, when he was transformed, he changed his name, Saul to Paul. And the guy, it's like no turning back. He went 180. If he was going this way, he was in the opposite direction. Yeah. And there wasn't any hankering or yearning for the previous life.
Yeah.
That sort of, that repentance of who I was, and now this is where I'm going, and I'm 100%.
Yeah, I think, if you're anything like me or anybody that's listening is anything like this, we have blinders on our eyes. Like we're focused on what we're focused on. Like we're looking straight ahead at what we need to do, what we need to accomplish, what we want to accomplish, what needs to happen in order for us to be successful. And there are moments in our life, and sometimes it's a tragedy. Sometimes it's a losing of a job. Yeah. Sometimes it's something happening with a child, or we start something and financially it doesn't work out. We find ourselves at a low in a valley. And I think those valley seasons of our life have the opportunity for a couple things. One, we have this encounter with God of realizing he's not just for us on the mountaintops, he's for us in the valleys too. And when you have that experience with God and you experience his peace and his grace and his mercy in those seasons, you have the ability to leave that season and get focused on the right things instead of just what the world says are the right things. Or some of us, and I've been there before too, where we go in those valleys and we try to dig ourselves out. And if it's up to me, I'll get out of it and I'll do what it takes to get there. And then we end up in another valley in another season, and life kind of has those ups and downs. And I think the beautiful part about what Paul did is that he had this encounter. I think blinders came off of his eyes.
Yeah.
And he realized that my purpose in life is not what I think my purpose is. I have a greater purpose than that. And he discovered it in that moment. And like you said, he went all in, had vision and purpose, and never turned back.
I want you, people, this hit me from what Kyle was saying. Those blinders, sometimes it's unbeknownst. It's like it just becomes the rat race, grind, whatever. And you end up just going past who you're supposed to be, what your purpose is all the time, in the effort to just kind of pay bills, maybe at week's end.
Sure, pay bills or have a position, or have a title.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think we live in a world that we feel like will be more secure the more success we have, and some of the most successful people I know are still trying to figure out the purpose side of life.
Exactly right. Okay, this is from my research Bible that I have as we dive into Paul the character. Because again, it's like if you want to study leadership, this is your guy. It says here, no person apart from Jesus himself shaped the history of Christianity quite like the Apostle Paul. Then it goes, and further down, the statement is made, God did not waste any part of Paul. His background, his training, his citizenship, his mind, or even his weaknesses. Then there's a question, are you willing to let God do the same for you? You will never know all that he can do until you allow him to have all that you are. So it's with that in mind, I want to dive into the man now.
Yeah.
Okay. You said we didn't need multiple podcasts, so we're going to move through this stuff. He seems to be the perfect model for leadership, and I want to start here. You think of Paul, and then you see all the books of the Bible that he wrote, and his letter to whoever, and letter to this, and the letter to this community. But the reality is, he was a real team builder.
Yeah.
He had folks around him all the time, and at the end of most letters, he'd write like this long thank you list thanks to Priscilla and Aquila, and to my boy Timothy, and then there's Barnabas, and all these folks that went throughout the journeys with him. So it wasn't like he had this divine inspiration and word from God to minister the gospel to the Gentiles. But he didn't try and go it alone. And I feel like that is like the ultimate leadership lesson.
Oh, man, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I think we live in a culture right now that says, it's all about me.
Yeah.
Social media, as long as my followers and my reels and my TikTok gets the likes. So it's all about me. I've got to come up with the content. I've got to come up with, and I think God's economy is very different. I think we're better together. I think that two can do more than one. A three-stranded cord is harder to be broken. And I think Paul did
there's
this.
my pastor's warning about your marriage. Okay.
I think Paul was the example of this. I mean, if you read through the New Testament, you see that he mentored Timothy, he mentored Titus. He realized I can do more by mentoring and multiplying my influence and my character in these younger guys and allowing them to go lead. And that's what he did. He built teams, he mentored, and then he entrusted them with leadership. And one of my favorite quotes of all time, it comes from my pastor over the last several years. It comes from his father-in-law, and he just says, my greatest success in life is helping other people become successful. And I love living my life that way, Mark. I think you do it with the guys that you work with. You're always encouraging them and building them up. Like, I'm better because of the team around me. You're better because of the team around you. And if we can help other people become successful in what's in their heart, then we're ultimately going to end up being more successful as well. So I think Paul was just this model of entrusting guys with leadership, training them, sending them out, making them successful. And through that success, he had crazy success in reaching way more people and having way more followers and way more influence in our terms of our culture today than he ever could if he would have gone at it alone.
You speak of multiplication. It's not like said in the Bible, but the more stories I read and the more I learn to understand this stuff, the more I realize that multiplication is something that's real in God's economy.
Oh, yeah.
And if you think about who Paul was, he had the moment, he had the transformation, he got the message, off he goes and he starts to meet people along the way. And as he formed these churches and ministered to people wherever he was, it's like there was this multiplication on the go.
Yeah.
As the little community here, and then they grew. And it's amazing, like if Paul gets to watch the whole thing now.
Yeah.
like the Gentile community around the world who are all Christians, that all really began with his messaging. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I think the reason leaders or people struggle with building teams, handing things off, and trusting others to take your message, your brand, your idea, your product, and running with it is, I think we struggle sometimes with, if we're going to hand things off to the people we're going to hand them off to, do they understand the principles? Do they understand the main pillars, the main building blocks of what it is we're trying to do? And if they do, then you have to allow them to go lead. And we struggle because we like to show up and our preferences aren't met, but the principles are in place.
Yeah,
And we sometimes, we push so hard on, well, don't do it like that. I would do it like this. This is how you should do it. And I call it preference leadership, which suffocates people. If they understand the principles, if they understand the vision, if they understand the purpose, which I think Titus and Timothy and these guys did, Paul didn't follow them around and micromanage them, calling them out about every little preference that they might do a little different, because everybody's gifted differently, everybody's wired differently, everybody thinks about it a little bit differently. So if they can do it at 80% of how you would do it, then trust that the 20% that's different is still great, because they are who they are and you are who you are. But you'll suffocate people if you live in this preference world of how you would do it. Well, then you're going to end up only doing it, which means you can't multiply. You might add, but you'll never multiply your leadership.
You're preaching, Pastor. Okay, another element to Paul's character, as I read, as I digest and really kind of, dig into this thing, he had a boldness about him.
He did.
I mean, this guy, well, first off, he kicks off most of the chapters, probably all of them, with like, I, Paul, write this letter to you, whoever. It's a message I got directly from God, basically, and I paraphrase. And wherever he went into these communities, there was this like unabashedness about who I am, why I'm coming, what's my mission. Now listen to me. It's something that sadly I feel like is not lacking, but it's in short supply, given nowadays that we all have this device we can hide behind, or this X account we can hide behind, and we're all creating this persona. Paul's like, here I am. Used to be a bad guy, Jew. Now I'm a missionary for God, an apostle, firm believer. I'm coming in here. Here's my message. Do with it what you wish.
Well, I think one of Paul's greatest messages, and you can talk about this, is as you read some of the books that he wrote, perseverance is such a huge theme of Paul's life and character. Speaking of his character, I think if you were going to sum up, in one word who Paul was, it would land somewhere in that word of perseverance. I mean, my man went through it. Yeah. Like, even if you're not a Christian, like, just to read the books that Paul wrote, like, it would encourage you, because it's like, man, my guy, I mean, he is the ultimate, like Vince Lombardi said, it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, as long as you get back up. Like, Paul is like the guy. Michael Jordan said, I failed 1,000 times, but that's the only reason why I succeeded. And like, that is Paul 101. If you're listening and you're a sports fan, like, you would have loved Paul. You would want it, Paul. You want Paul on your fantasy team. You want Paul's jersey, because my guy just would not stop moving forward in what he was called to do. And I think perseverance is the thing that's lacking maybe a little bit in our world today. Like, I think we want to have influence. We want to have leadership. We want to be at the top. We're real quick to talk about our bosses, or talk about the people that are in a position of authority maybe over us, or an influence over us. But until you've sat in that seat, you never understand the pressure that someone has at the top. And we've got to learn how to persevere and wait and be patient. We want things so quickly. But if you get somewhere too soon and you haven't built perseverance in your life, you'll fall way harder.
As soon as the storm hits.
I think that's why people struggle getting back up, is we try to get somewhere before we're supposed to be there. And we haven't built up this endurance, this perseverance, this ability that when failure comes, I can get back up. And just to be patient and honestly trust the people that are ahead of you, learn from them, is so huge.
Yeah, he wrote about that. And as I think back to the previous two podcasts with Joseph and with David, that
Similar
thread
stories.
runs through there as well, where it's like just sticking to it, and eventually your
Faithfulness.
moment will come. Yeah, faithfulness.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote this down. I put, his resilience reminds leaders that challenges are inevitable, but faithfulness leads to impact.
Yeah.
Like, we want one video to lead to impact. We want one celebrity to share what we do and it leads to impact. But truthfully, with the guys I see that have impact for a long time, they were faithful. It wasn't just a one-hit wonder. It was every day, getting up, doing what they're called to do, getting back up, doing what they're called to do, taking the criticism, getting back up, doing what they're called to do. And faithfulness ultimately leads to impact.
It's amazing the value of one. And when you and I decided to go ahead with this show, one of the missions was, even if it touches just one person.
Right.
And again, I'm trying to put myself in Paul's shoes, because I had written down here that Paul was brave and confrontational, because he confronted Peter, among others, who at that stage then, Jesus has gone back to heaven, risen again, and Peter is kind of the guy amongst the Jews, right? The apostles. And Paul goes and confronts him.
Yeah.
And Peter eventually capitulates. But through it all, it's always this one-on-one sort of a thing. There were occurrences where Paul would speak to a group of people. But more often than not, it's just this me and you kind of thing. And you just convert that one person. And it's amazing, the multiplication thing then.
Well, I think the part of the story we can't see is that I think Paul fought through so much. He persevered through so much that even when he had to go confront giants, I mean, Peter's a giant of the faith. I mean, Jesus looked at Peter and said, I'm going to build my church on you. And Paul can go and confront such a leader, such a personality, such a believed in person. But I think even Peter could receive it, and others could receive it. Titus could receive it. Timothy could receive it, because they saw Paul's faithfulness. Faithfulness just gives you so much.
Like a calling card, huh?
Yes, it gives you so much influence with people. It doesn't matter maybe even how big of something. It's not even about what you've done, how big it is. It's about, I like to know how long somebody's done something more than how big something is.
And I would add to that, and it's just popped in my head, it was, singularity is the wrong word, but it's like, Paul, it was black or white. There was no wishy-washy. It's not like, well, you might want to consider this. It's like, this is my message. And that's to be respected, and it garners respect with people as well. You'd agree?
Oh, no doubt. I think he was secure.
Yeah.
People love secure leaders. Like anywhere we're insecure, light will be shed on that. And insecurity is what hurts people that you lead. But a secure leader, even if they're black and white, it might hurt feelings, but I think people would rather know where you stand than to have someone not, where there's not clarity is kindness.
Yeah, clarity is kindness.
And when there's no clarity, you don't know where you stand with people. And I think Paul just had a security about him. He knew what God did in his life, and he was secure and bold in the mission that he was on.
This may be out of order, but I had down here, he was ambitious.
Yeah,
I mean,
slightly.
Yeah, well, his mission was to preach the gospel to places where no one had ever heard it before. And it's not like he's got social media or the internet. He's walking, or he's maybe on a donkey if you're lucky.
Yeah.
He's on a ship as he's going past various places there on the way to Rome. So there was an ambition there, but I feel like that sort of fits in with, okay, I've understood who I am.
Yeah.
Now nothing's going to stop me.
Right, and I think because of that, he had adaptability, he had innovation. He would go say the same things. If you read some of the New Testament, he's saying the same things, but in different ways because of the audience that he was talking to. So he was just so secure that he was able to innovate. I mean, he used letters. He used other people. He mentored people. He planted churches. He just innovated. He just figured out ways to. He's like, I'm going to take this message and I'm going to get it out to as many people as I can. And I think he had to adapt along the way. I think he had to think of new ways to do it from prison. I mean, he's writing some of these, again, like you said, some of these books were written in prison. He just figured out ways to continue to move forward.
You're motivating me, man. I
Let's
know Joseph is
What are we going to go do? Let's go do something.
Joseph is your favorite Bible hero.
Yeah.
And I'm watching you talk about Paul right now. I'm like, oh, yeah.
I know. Paul makes you want to run through a wall. Like
No
Joseph
kidding.
makes you feel like, God's faithful. Paul makes you feel like God's super powerful, which he is. But Paul's the guy you want to give you want him in your halftime locker room to give the speech for sure.
You touched on the way he communicates with people. And what was cool was he wouldn't just come in there with, well, there wasn't a Bible. He had, I'm sure, scrolls of the Old Testament. And he was a litigator of sorts, because he'd make a statement. So do you think so? What if? No. And then he sort of litigate and sell the thing to you. But he would speak in the tongue of the group that he was with. So it's kind of like you, the leader. I watch you with your congregation. My kids, you're like, hey, man, how you doing? And you're the cool, hip pastor guy.
Yeah,
And then
super
with
cool.
the old guys like me, you're a little bit more sort of paternal and leadership-wise. I feel like that is a massive attribute to being a great dad, a great business leader, a great anything, honestly, if you're a man or a woman. Communication.
No, I couldn't agree more. And again, I know, thank you for saying that about me. You shut me down in the last podcast when I tried to like compliment you, so I'm not going to allow you to do it. I'm putting it out in front of you. But I do think this is, Mark, you're an incredible instructor in golf. People know that. Everybody loves that. But I've always heard what you do so well is you're able to take what somebody is good at. So I'm a baseball guy, never played golf in my life. But when you talk to me about my golf swing, you talk in baseball terms. And it made so much sense to me. If you were with an engineer, you would talk engineer terms.
Yeah.
And I think we're so worried sometimes maybe about our delivery of when we communicate instead of slowing down and going, how can I communicate to this person in a way they can understand?
Yeah.
How can I take what I'm trying to teach somebody and say it in a way that fits them? Now it's harder. Like, because I just want to say it how I want to say
You
it.
got to know. Well, how about this? You got to know your subject intimately to be able to do that.
Every good communicator knows his audience. Paul knew his audience. That's why he communicated the same things in different ways, because he understood their culture.
Yeah.
He understood how they thought about things. He understood the right questions to ask to make them, go a level deeper. And I think that's what every good communicator does as a pastor. I think that's what every good announcer does on TV. I think that's what every good motivational speaker can do to inspire you, is learning your audience. And it is more work for you because we just want to say it how we want to say it. But when you can learn how to say it, how somebody can receive it, your influence has the ability to skyrocket. Again, that's what Paul did. And that's why we love his letters in the Bible, because we can read different books and some of them hit differently based on you grew up in South Africa. I grew up in Alabama. I'm a baseball guy. You're a golf guy. You're much older than I am. I'm much younger than you are. Much younger than you are. So we hear it.
Yes.
We hear it in different ways. And I think that's what Paul was brilliant at, is let me say this 5 different ways so that it touches everybody, not just one group of people.
I was traveling back from an assignment trip last night, and I was listening to the Bible. And, Paul to me was always Romans and Philippians and Corinthians and Thessalonians. Galatians hit me as I was listening to it. And I do want to touch this quickly, and I guess it pertains to me as well, where Paul just seemed tremendously thankful. At the end of all the books, he thanked everybody. At the beginning of the book, he thanks you. And he's like, well, I'm praying for you always. So there was intercessory work going on. And that becomes personal for me, because there's so many situations where you're in something and then you're beginning to change and you're going in a different direction, kind of like I am with this. I'm nervous as a cat doing this stuff. I can talk about golf all day long. But if you go into it with this, like, I'm thankful to be here. And I've prepared, and I'm going to now just do my best. And I pray before the time, and, hopefully, thankfully, I deliver the message that I should, because I've always believed, and this is to the communication, the message is only as good as what it's understood. And that fits with Paul's thing, and that's what you do nicely too, is like, all right, you're a pastor, but I know you always weren't going to be a pastor. And the communication, I'm sure, was a learned skill. Yes?
Oh, 100%. I think there are people that are naturally good communicators, but learning how to put things together, learning how to say things in a way that people can understand. And I still miss it all the time. You got audiences with 13-year-old teenage girls in the room, and you got, 70-year-old businessmen who were super successful and everything in between, single people, married people, different cultures, different backgrounds, different ways of thinking of things. So I think the goal is, I love what you said, because I do think gratitude is a precursor to confidence.
Okay.
I think if I'm very grateful for whatever opportunity I'm in, even if I'm a little insecure about it, there's a confidence that shifts in that, because I'm just so grateful to have the opportunity. Like, it could have been anybody, but it was me. And that just brings a confidence to know that somebody thought you were good enough to give you whatever opportunity it is you might, even all the way down to parenting. Like, God trusted you with children, and like, you're grateful to have them, so it should give you a confidence even when you're insecure about what you should do and what decision you should make with them. So having a heart of gratitude is always a precursor to more confidence in any area that you're leading.
Well, communication is not just verbal, it's nonverbal too. And a grateful way it shows in
Yep.
one's stature, one's comportment.
100% facial expressions.
yeah.
Like it just, yeah, absolutely. I think, Mark, what I love about this whole thought, again, we could do 3 more episodes on Paul.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll come back to him in the future. And
Lots
just-
more to get to before
yeah,
that. Okay.
yeah, and touch some other areas of his life. But I know that for both of us, this is like, I mean, so much of this is our stories
So true.
of just living one way, having a moment where things changed, and then refocusing our life and making sure that, you know, what we're doing has purpose in it. I mean, we started this out of that idea
Yeah.
that God opened a door for you to do what you do today, and you're so good at it. But you've always said, since the moment I met you, I know I'm doing this because I have a skill set to do it, but I've always felt like it was for a deeper purpose. And I love watching you get focused around that. So, I mean, talk about that a little bit. Just share that story of,
I knew you were going to do this.
I know,
You're gonna
it's
put me
great
on
for the
spot.
people,
I'm not
yes.
allowed to cry on this show. Okay. Yeah, my entire life I've been, you know, in sport, and sport's been a vehicle for me, and whatever I've managed to achieve, and I'm thankful for all of it. I always really felt like there was something more. And then thankful to my wife, Tracy, because along the way, I sort of, as I look back now, I see these little breadcrumbs along the way, sort of leading me in the journey that I'm on right now. And then eventually it just got to a place where this voice inside, I couldn't resist it anymore. Now, it wasn't a voice. It was just a feeling.
Yeah.
And maybe this was my, you know, my bright light moment. And I didn't go blind, thankfully, but it was like, okay, now it's something to do about this. And the cool thing about it, Kyle, is it brought an energy. It brought an excitement. And it brought kind of like this childish sort of a freedom to just want to now read the Bible a bit more, because now I've got something to do about it. I can't just be faking this. I can fake golf stuff a little bit, right? I can fake golf announcing, but there's no faking now. And then, because I do know, as a longtime golf teacher, coach, in the Bible, one of the Proverbs is, you know, if you're a teacher, you know, there's a little extra judgment for you when you get into heaven one day, because
Absolutely.
you're responsible for other
Yep.
people.
Yep.
And so now with this thing on the go, it's made me want to spend more time in the Word,
It's great.
which is so it's not just I get to do this now, it's this growth that I'm experiencing in me. And it's kind of like Paul, where I haven't changed my name. Maybe I should. Something cool like Kyle. But it's changed, and now it's like, I don't know, I'm a new creation.
Yeah, you're focused. I think that's what it's allowed you to do. Like you're great at what you get to do, but this has brought a different focus to you and for you. And again, with a vision, without a vision, people perish. So like even in our jobs, like we can get complacent. You know, humans all drift to the status quo. We get comfortable. We know what we can get away with. We know what we can wing. We know what we need to prepare for. And like you said, when you take something else on, you got to get refocused again.
Yeah.
And focus always gives us the opportunity to push past what our natural abilities want us to. And in our world, as a Christ follower, when we get focused around a mission that's a little beyond our natural skill set, we have to trust God. And that's a great place to be. Great place to be.
Behold, the old is going. the
new is
new has
coming.
come.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the new is here. Closing thought for you, real quick.
Yeah, I mean, if you're listening to the podcast, leader, golfer, I think we all lead, by the way, in one way, shape, or form. I think we think leadership is a title, but we're all leading. Somebody's watching us. It might just be our children. It might be a buddy on our golf team. It might be an employee at our office space. It might be a cousin that's distant from us, but we're all being watched. So you're leading somewhere. I think it's just a great question to ask ourselves coming out of this podcast is some of these thoughts from Paul, like, how am I doing as a leader? Like, am I persevering through some tough times? Am I getting better at what I'm asked to do? Do I have purpose in what I'm doing? And if I don't, I would challenge people to think about what they're doing with their life and in their career. I think we get so nervous about, I could never quit a job because I've got to provide. And I would just say, man, if you could find something that you have purpose in, you'll never feel like you work a day in your life. And I would ask people to slow down and just take some of these thoughts that we brought out and ask themselves the question, like, how am I doing leading whatever it is that you would say you were leading? And then how do you take one thought from this podcast and put it into place this week as you've watched this or listened to it? Take one thing and practice it this week. Practice it in your leadership with a team meeting. Practice it at home with a child. Practice it wherever you can. Take somebody and tell somebody about this, and have some accountability around how am I doing as a leader? Because if you're trusted to be a leader, leaders always have to be getting better. The moment you stop getting better, that's the moment you've stopped leading. So that's what I would say today. And just in Paul's story, whoever's listening, you have never done something too bad to get back right with God or to be used by God. And if you don't believe that, please go pick up the New Testament, find the Bible, find the books of the Bible that Paul wrote, and just read his story. Because to think that Paul went from 1 to 100 with God, and that you can't go from where you're at to where God wants you to be, it's not the right thought process. And I hope the story, and I hope today even encourages you to know that you've never done something too wrong to be used by God and to fulfill your purpose in your life.
To that, if you have questions, comments, if you need prayer or advice, you can DM us on the social handles, X and Instagram, at The Greater Call. Search subscribe to get this on YouTube. Tell your friends, tell your friends. The podcast is also available at my website, Mark Immelman. Just search for the podcast tab. In the meantime, just like Paul, be full of joy in everything, no matter where you are. Be thankful and go and be a legend.